Let me remind you that we are discussing manufacturing facilities and related production systems. The latter is a network of interdependent operations resources that work together to transform raw materials into finished goods. When it comes to managing such systems, especially in small batch or high mix low volume or job shop manufacturing, you can often hear the following two statements from the factory people and even consultants. The higher the equipment loading, the higher the overall performance of the entire system, as well as the sooner orders are put into production, the better. To understand the situation, let's consider a simple reference system proposed by James Holt 20 years ago in his well-known The Job Shop Game Simulator. There are 4 workstations, each of one machine, A, B, C, and D, and 4 different end products with different routines are produced. For the first yellow product, 1 day of processing on resource A is required, then another 1 day on B, 1 day on C, and finally 1 day on D. For the second blue product, 1 day on B is required, followed by 1 day on C, then 1 more day on B, and finally 1 day on D. The third green product, 1 day on A, 1 day on C, 1 day on D, and 1 day on B. The last one, orange product, 1 day on A, then 2 full days on B, and 1 day on C. So there are no variations in cycle time on the workstations, and the total touch time is exactly 4 days for each product. We will assume that exactly 1 customer order for only 1 product is placed every day. We don't know in advance which product will be ordered tomorrow, but the market is structured in such a way that each product is ordered with equal probability. To ensure the reproducibility of the simulation results, we will consider 24 orders of 6 products of each type arriving in the following random sequence. We also assume that the raw materials for all products are always available, and the system is empty at the beginning of each simulation session. We will consider 3 scenarios for managing this system. The first one is a traditional approach, where 1 new order is put into production every day. That is, as soon as it's placed, and if there is a queue in front of any workstation, the ERD rule is applied. That is, the order with the earliest release date is selected for processing. Well, at the beginning of the first business day, the first order is ready to be processed at workstation B according to its roadmap, and by the beginning of the second day, it is moved to workstation C, while the second order becomes ready to be processed at workstation A. Let's look at how the system's state changes at the beginning of each following day. The first order is completed in 4 days. The system is saturated until the last order is put into production on the 24th day, and then it obviously dries out. The last order is completed at the end of the 38th day. And this is how the system was loaded throughout the entire period under consideration. If we analyze the 21-day time frame from the day the first order was completed to the day the last one was released, we can see that the overall equipment utilization during this period was 74%, and the first 14 orders were completed. Is it possible to work more effectively? To answer this question, we need to understand what's wrong with this solution. First of all, pay attention to the ever-increasing work in process. That is the number of uncompleted orders in production. As a result, according to Little's law, we should expect an increase in production lead times as well. And this is exactly what happens. The average is more than 10 days, but in an unstable process, it does make sense to talk about the average. Instability means unpredictability. In this case, in particular, we cannot estimate how long it will take to complete an order once it is put into production. Obviously, such behavior of the system is determined by the specifics of the workstation B, which is the only resource here whose demand gradually grows over time. According to the Apex dictionary definition, this is a bottleneck in the system, and there is only one of them here. Yes, sometimes the queue in front of C is longer or equal to the one before B, but it quickly disappears. And in the long run, or over a certain extended characteristic period of time, all other resources are successfully handling the demand placed upon them. That is confirmed by the corresponding calculated regression coefficients. Is it possible to manage our system more predictably? One of my colleagues, a developer of a magical super job scheduler, suggested a solution. For a known sequence of incoming orders, the following operations detailed schedule was proposed. If we follow this schedule, we will be able to complete all orders in 37 days instead of 38, and the overall equipment utilization for the reference time frame will increase from 74 to 75%. Excellent result, and 10 completed orders instead of 14 can probably be considered just a minor side effect. Look at how the system's state dynamically changes now. Backlog orders are marked with bold circles. Just in case, let's check the other system dynamics parameters. Wow! Work in process within the reference time frame is now growing faster. And look what happens to the production lead times. I would call it a mess, and the average is even higher than before. As far as demand for resources is concerned, B becomes an even more problematic but still single bottleneck. Is this the price we have to pay for 1% of the increase in machine utilization? Keep in mind also that in this second scenario, the sequence of incoming orders was assumed to be known in advance. Is it even possible to promise some completion dates when orders are placed in such a system? In fact, to be predictable, a system must be stable and have only one control point. And we should stop worrying about machine loading and earlier starts. There are several ways to achieve this, but we will only consider one here. A detailed description of the drum buffer rope approach is beyond the scope of this presentation, and I will only show how it can be applied in this particular case. Let's call the workstation B a drum. Define the work in process buffer R as the total number of days it will take for workstation B to process all orders still in production. Denote R with an asterisk as the length of the rope and set it to, say, 4 days. I'd like to remind that it takes 1 day on B to make each yellow and green product, and 2 days to make each blue and orange. We will follow the rule. If at the end of the business day the buffer size exceeds the rope length, the next order in line is not put into production. To select from the queue, the ERD rule is applied. So, at the beginning of the first day, the buffer size is 0 and the first order is arrived that needs 2 days on B. After the first operation is completed, it is transferred to workstation C and it will only take 1 day to process this order on B later. Putting the second, third, fourth, and fifth order into production gradually increases the size of the time buffer. But at the end of the fifth day, it becomes equal to 5, which is greater than the length of the rope. The gateway closes, the sixth order remains in the backlog, and is put into production the seventh day, when the buffer size decreases to 4. See what happens next. At the end of the 24th day, there are 6 orders that have not been put into production yet. And the last one is released on the 33rd day only. Here is the final loading profile. As for our 21-day reference time frame, we now have 14 completed orders, as in the first scenario, but the overall equipment utilization has decreased from 74 to 64%, and the system's behavior has drastically changed. The work in process has stabilized as expected, which in turn inevitably led to the stabilization of production lead times, making them predictable. That is 6-7 days on average, but no longer than 9. And if we look at the resource demand graphs, we can see that there are no bottlenecks in the system anymore. So, what is a B workstation if it's not a bottleneck? The capacity constraint of the system, by definition. Generally speaking, in a well-organized and properly managed production system, there is usually only one such constraint that acts as a control point and no bottlenecks. It is worth emphasizing that, like bottlenecks, capacity constraints are attributes of dynamic rather than detailed complexity of a system. In our case, if we analyze the internal structure of the system and the structure of market demand, we can easily see that the following resources are required for an average order: 3/4 of a day on A, a day and a half on B, 1 day on C, and 3/4 of a day on D. In other words, the average productivity of such a system is 2/3 of an order per day, which is exactly 14 orders in 21 days, as was obtained in the first and third scenarios. In the latter one, however, the system appeared to be stable and predictable, even with later starts and much lower machine utilization.